Well, hello, Patriots. I am so pleased to be with you. Again, I have a nice little fire going. I know I say this often, but it's true, and I love it. It's a gray day here in Seattle, Washington, and I'm sitting in my record room of 40,000 albums, 10,000 45s, and probably several thousand tapes, including 8 tracks and the like, and a lot of sound system going on in this little abode that I have. Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining me here today. I'm excited about the topic that I will be speaking to you about, which is right where we are right now with this information coming down. The title of our talk today is Crosshairs. And I put out a Lesbian Training for Men episode 4, which has the same title. And I'm really being moved to talk about it. In episode 4, I talked about how my wonderful brother is a systems guy. And it took me a long time to kind of notice that about him. But once I became more available for the information that he would share with me, I started to see just how much of a systems guy he was. And in fact, it actually took me a while to put my finger on it, but that's really what I would say is one of his biggest strengths. My brother has served his country and continues to serve his country for many, many years, and I have always had admiration for that. He's a funny guy, he's smart, and he cares about people surviving terrible disasters, tragedies, catastrophes, things that are natural disasters, things that are not natural disasters, but disasters nonetheless. He has always impressed me with the way that he can come up with 5 or 6 solutions to a problem or an issue or a thought or worry about what might happen. And I'm talking about like anything from how to fix something to end of the world stuff. We've had many, many discussions on how to handle certain situations, perhaps how to look out for the signs on certain situations, and how to, I think most importantly, remove oneself from a situation that could possibly be within the crosshairs of an agenda or malevolent force that is taking aim. What I love about this whole concept that he is so eloquent in is that it not only creates a way for there to be less victims in the world per se, let's just say that, but also to disarm the idea that we should even consider ourselves victims for the majority of the time. This is accomplished in a couple of ways. The first way is to know when to get out of a situation, when to exit with as much stealth and expediency as possible, and 2, how to deal with a situation once something has gone awry and begun, and we find ourselves within the crosshairs of it. I was having a really lovely conversation with my friend Bev today, and one of the things we talked about is this overwhelming idea that we need to be preoccupied with everything going on around us, with taking the temperature on everything. Those are really important things, and I'll never discount that or say that that's not true. However, in order to make it to the point where we actually have the privilege and the time and the moment to go over either retroactively or in a predictive manner anything that is to occur or has occurred, we must survive. Now, one of the things we also talked about was the perception of what it is we are to survive. And in fact, are we actually personally being targeted when something does occur? And I happen to think that most of the time we are not. And this is simply because, in effect, whatever it is that's operating and moving like a tornado is not, it doesn't have its name written on itself looking for you, going through some kind of Interpol system to find a match to the facial recognition that it's searching. I brought up in the conversation about the fact that I was rewatching 6 Feet Under, and I really loved that series when it came out, and for some reason I was kind of moved this week to see a couple of episodes. In this particular episode last night, it was an uncle and a nephew, and the uncle had worked in this industrial bakery for many, many years, and he was so used to and sort of desensitized to everything around him that he was almost purely automatic in what he was doing to clean at night for the next day. The nephew, however, was a new hire, and so the uncle was trying to teach him some of the things that you have to do to make sure everything gets done and checked off before the end of the shift. They approached this extremely large mixer. In fact, it's so big that it's probably about 4 or 5 feet taller than the man's head. And it also has a capacity to carry quite a bit of dough. In fact, I would say you could probably fit at least 5 or 6, if not 10 people in there. He explains to the nephew that you have to actually get inside of the mixer in order to clean it. And so after climbing on one of those roller step ladders, he gets up on the edge of it, hoists his legs over, and gets down into the mixer. The nephew instinctually notices that this is probably not a very good situation. It doesn't feel right. And he gets up on the ladder. He's like, do we have to clean it like this? Can't we just spray it down with some chemical and leave it at that? The uncle says, yeah, and poison everybody the next day with bread that's made from some kind of residue of this chemical. And he's kind of incensed a little bit. You know, he's trying to show the nephew that, look, I'm the one who knows what I'm doing here. Okay. So he starts to clean the sides of it. He's like, this is how you do it. And the nephew falls, hits the start switch, and thus there is the next victim, soon to be made ready in the funeral home that the story revolves around in all of the episodes. I thought about that today, and I thought about the victimhood and the systems and all that stuff. And what I came to was that, isn't it interesting that here's this person that climbed inside of this very dangerous piece of machinery. And even though the blades, which were kind of massive, were not sharp, one of them coming to about the man's shoulder and the other one falling around the calf area, that he really just had no sense of danger. He had no sense of caution, and there wasn't any longer this objective point of view for that which he had entered. It wasn't until there was the inescapable, literally, situation that he found himself in with the blades going, of which you don't see any of that, by the way, that now he was not in a position to be precautionary about the previously precarious moment that now had turned deadly, and was indeed in the crosshairs of something that independently acted as it was designed to, having nothing to do with him, having nothing to do with his decisions, and having nothing to do with even the intentions that it was built out of. This being said, the man, literally getting mixed up in that, lost his DNA physical life due to being in the crosshairs of something that independently operated as it was built to. I say this because there is so much in this world that is going on, energetically, physically, spiritually, morally, even philosophically, and definitely politically, that in my recent experiences of being in situations that I thought were so familiar and had taken them for granted for being safe, what I saw was they are only safe if I myself, an independently acting person, placed myself in a position that was not in the crosshairs of that which was going to act independently of me. And so the idea of victimhood and trauma could at least at the very basic level be reduced simply because we are not spending all of our time in conjecture, but in preparing when we can to avoid the crosshairs of that which we are no match for, and to put our focus on what we can independently do in a safer zone to promote and be proactive about the life that we want. This is an incredibly freeing concept for me, because while it has been encouraged in our world to be obsessively and compulsively aware of certain things, and I would wager to say most of them technological, the entire moments in Second Renaissance could flit by us in a moment while we are hyper-focused on that which cannot be the priority if we are going to continue to be alive and healthy in order to handle the subsequent nuances of life. Even though my brother is several years younger than me, I have learned an enormous amount, not just on information on how to deal with specific things, but on perhaps the stance and attitude about that there are things that I would rather avoid than handle. We've talked about filters and funnels, and I would say also buffers. And this is where the fine line may not be so apparent. Because while we are at times looking to see what it is that we are wanting to be available for or not be available for, to refine our balance about not making what our boundaries and borders are into a prison gate for ourselves. And so being liberated from the impetus to be hyper-focused on media, news, things coming at me all the time, I find this to be, again, quite freeing, because now I can relax a little and know that if something comes up, I'll be able to detect it a little sooner, perhaps avoid it a little better, and definitely a little more able to have reserves that I didn't use for those other things unnecessarily to handle a situation so that I come through it intact and ready for what is next. In these ways, my hat goes off to those who are first responders, to those who've served our country well, and to those who look out so that if something does happen and people are caught unaware or don't know what to do about a situation that has arisen, they run towards the danger while we run away from it, because they are well trained with the intention of handling that situation in the safest way possible so that they can be alive another day to help once again. And I want to close with saying that while there definitely is evil and trauma in this world, it is so important to understand what is our fight and what is God's fight. There is no way to fight that which is God's fight with the human that we are. And thus, when we do take the example and the model of those who know how to prepare and how to execute a well thought out survival plan, we also lean into our Heavenly Father, who is ready to hold us outside of those crosshairs to handle the rest.